Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Before he became the bloated tyrant that we all know today with a murderous glint in his eye, Henry VIII was just a second son, never meant to be king, absolutely never meant to marry his brother's wife, and certainly never meant to launch a one-man divorce revolution. But fate, much like a Tudor banquet, was messy, meaty, and full of bones. Let's get into it.
Morbid History.
Section 1. A crown fit for a second son. Once upon a time in the late 15th century, young Henry Tudor entered this world, not as an heir, but a spare. Born on June 28, 1491, Henry was the second son of King Henry VII and the beloved Elizabeth of York. This royal couple who stitched together the bloody tapestry of Wars of the Roses through their union. But every Tudor tale worth its weight in ghostly omens begins with a loss. When little Henry was only 11 years old, his very beloved Mother Elizabeth shuffled off this mortal coil, likely from postpartum complications, after delivering a child who also sadly expired very shortly after. Her demise reportedly devastated the very young Henry, who loved his mother a lot, leaving a void the size of a maternal crown and planting very early seeds of obsession with love, legacy, and heirs, of course. Meanwhile, Henry's older brother, Prince Arthur, was groomed from the cradle for the throne. He was courtly, serious, and very much his father's pride. Arthur was wed at the tender age of 15 to Catherine of Aragon, daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. This alliance, the marriage between these little teenagers, was a big old grand political power move, a grand Anglo-Spanish alliance, and everyone liked that. But alas, just five months after the young couple's I-do's, Arthur fell mysteriously ill and vacated the throne and this mortal coil, leaving a 16-year-old widow and a kingdom with a spare son suddenly next in line. And thus the torch was passed to young Henry, now an unexpected heir. The young Henry was seen as bright, handsome, athletic, and extremely tall for his time, fluent in the divine languages of Latin, flirtation, and swordplay. But what about the Spanish widow? Section 2. A wife recycled? So, dear Catherine of Aragon, still residing in England in some kind of widowhood limbo, declared her marriage to Arthur unconsummated. They did not do either way, either out of virtue or strategy. This detail would become a big linchpin in England's bloodiest crisis. Henry VII, ever the frugal and conniving patriarch, didn't want to lose Catherine's hefty dowry or piss off Spain, so he arranged for her to eventually marry his second son, our dear Henry. But such a union required a papal permission slip, because canon law forbade a man from marrying his brother's wife. And to this day, historians still scratch their little heads over whether this papal dispensation granted was of divine inspiration or just being bullied into it. So the years passed, Henry VII died, and the crown slipped into the hands of the just 17-year-old Henry VIII. And with the throne came the widow. In 1509, the young golden-haired Henry wed Catherine of Aragon. She was by the time 23 years old, and as said, he was 17. It was said that he actually really deeply loved her at first, but as we know, the Tudor honeymoon phase has a short shelf life. When young King Henry married Catherine in June of 1509, the court and the small people of the land rejoiced. It was a love match wrapped in diplomacy. Golden-haired king and stately Spanish bride, seen as a second chance at fulfilling the alliance between England and Spain. For a time they seemed inseparable. Catherine was educated, pious, politically savvy, and fluent in Latin. Unlike many queens, she actually read books rather than dusting them off. She also had a steel spine under that velvet gown, raised in the court of Isabella of Castile, one of the most formidable queens in European history. But she was cursed with one thing that would unmake her: a womb that refused to deliver a living son. Between 1510 and 1518, Catherine endured at least 6 pregnancies, which most ended in miscarriages or stillbirths or babies who quickly expired. Only one child survived into adulthood, Mary, born 1516. A bright girl, yes, but definitely not the male heir Henry was so bloodthirstily hoping for. And the king, well, he was growing ever so restless. His roving eyes found solace in mistresses. Not a weird thing at all by this time, of course. History will remember particularly one lady in waiting, and her name was Anne Boleyn, but she was soon eclipsed by her more cunning and sharp-tongued sister, Anne. This Anne Boleyn was not content though to just be a mistress. She wanted a crown, not favor. And to marry Anne, Henry needed to annul his marriage to Catherine. But our dear Catherine of Aragon, Queen Catherine, wasn't going quietly. She flat out refused to admit that her marriage to the king's late brother Arthur had been consummated, and therefore Henry's and her marriage was lawful, and thus refused to step aside. So Henry had to go and ask the Pope at the time, Clement VII, for an annulment, since the Bible does say that you can't marry your brother's widow and all that, you know? But the Pope was not on his side. He might as well have asked for the moon on a spike at that point. Catherine became a symbol, a queen wronged. The English people adored her. She stood her ground even as Henry tried every legal and shady alleyway to discard her. And when the Pope stalled, Henry just snapped. He went ahead and split from the Catholic Church, founded the Church of England, and made himself the head of the church. How convenient! He could then declare his marriage to Catherine null and void without the Pope's blessing, and went ahead and married dear Anne in secret. And thus Catherine was cast out, banished to the cold halls of Kimbolton Castle, denied contact with her daughter Mary, and stripped of her title. In her final days, she wrote a letter to Henry, and I'm gonna read a part of it for you here. Catherine's final letter to Henry VIII, January 1536. My most dear lord, king and husband, I make this vow, that mine eyes desire you above all things. For my part, I pardon you everything, and I wish devoutly to pray God that he will pardon you also. For the rest, I commend unto you our daughter Mary, beseeching you to be a good father to her. She passed away shortly after, likely of cancer, though some whispered of poison, because of course they did. This was the medieval times, so yeah. Henry did not attend her funeral. But what he did was wear yellow that day. Some say it was a symbol of mourning in Spain. Others say it was the color of celebration. Given what we know of Henry, well, I'll let you viewers decide if he was mourning or celebrating. Section 3. Anne Boleyn, the queen who lost her head, literally. To call Anne Boleyn ambitious is like calling Henry moody or grumpy or whatever nice adjective we can. Either way, she was driven, very intelligent, politically savvy, and possessed a wit as dangerous as any broadsword. But what made her truly lethal at court was that she actually said no to the king. A slight interjection here. She did not properly say no, according to some sources, or there is sources. There is a letter from King Henry to Anne Boleyn where he expresses that he wants to kiss her little duckies soon, which would make us assume that he had opened up her chemise at some point and done that. And little duckies is medieval slang for female mammaries. So yeah, there's that. Moving on. Thanks for the consideration, it means the world. Thank you, thank you. While most women curtsied and curried favor, Anne danced just out of reach, refusing to be just another mistress. Maybe from seeing how Henry had discarded her own sister Mary not long ago. But she dangled something more tempting than beauty, the promise of a son. Henry was thoroughly bewitched. And thus, in 1527, he went ahead and began seeking that annulment from Catherine that we already talked about. The annulment took quite a while, and for 6 years Anne reigned, not as queen, but as some courtly coquette and wide-open scandal. The English people called her the Great Whore, but Henry, he called her his pure and honest lady. And in 1533, after declaring himself head of his shiny new Church of England, Henry finally married Anne Boleyn in secret. Anne was crowned in a lavish ceremony that reeked of roses and very, very, very much tension. She was already bragante. The stakes? They were sky high. This particular baby had to be a boy. But fate, thou art a cruel jester. Especially when it comes to this little Tudorian soap opera. On September 7th, 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter. A squawking, red-faced reminder that Tudor hopes are fragile things. She was named Elizabeth. Yes, that very Queen Elizabeth into the future, but now we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, let's go back to where we were. Anne's downfall did not come with a bang. It was a slow, soul-crushing spiral of miscarriages, jealousy, and just knives in people's backs, hidden by smiles. Her sharp tongue, once her greatest weapon, would be her doom. Henry started to grow cold and blamed Anne for everything, especially his lack of sons. And fast came May 1536, a spring dripping with betrayal. Anne was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and even plotting to demise the king. The evidence? Extremely flimsy at best. And the likely truth? He just wanted her gone as quick as possible. And his advisors were all too happy to deliver. 5 men were accused of being her lovers, including her own brother George Boleyn. At her sham of a trial, Anne defended herself with the dignity of a fallen angel, and she denied everything. But her fate was already thoroughly sealed. And then on May 19, 1536, we come to the end of dear Anne. She was to be executed by a French swordsman who was very skilled at his job, and that Henry had ordered in advance. Always efficient, that one. Her final words, while standing up there waiting for her head to be chopped off, were chillingly composed. I am come hither to die, for according to the law, and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak against of that, whereof I am accused and condemned to die. But I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good and gentle sovereign lord. O Lord, have mercy on me. To God I commend my soul. The axe, or well in this case sword, fell. Her head was placed on a straw-filled scaffold, and Henry, ever the romantic, was betrothed to his next queen the very next day. Well, how about that? Section 4. Jane Seymour, the queen who delivered a son and then delivered herself to the grave. Well, hi. Yes, this is a new ensemble because this is another day, another sleigh, as the kids say. Yeah, I still have the flu and my voice got the best of me, but I rested yesterday and I'm gonna continue on with Henry's little creepy, horrifying love life now. Yay! As you might all assume, when Anne Boleyn's swan-like neck hit the straw, our dear Henry had already been courting Jane Seymour for quite a while. I mean, it would be weird otherwise, since they were betrothed the day after Anne's execution. And not only that, they actually got married just 10 days after, and it's said that she was picking out her wedding dress on the day of the execution. Fantastic. So just like Brad Pitt, this man did not come with a sensitivity chip. Jane had been one of Anne's ladies in waiting, watching the queen's fall with quiet calculation. Where Anne had been too loud, too clever, too alive, Jane embodied the Tudor ideal of womanhood. Silent, obedient, and above all, very fertile looking. In Jane, Henry could actually just see everything that his kind of toxic relationship with Anne was not. So in many ways, all the ways, she seemed the complete opposite, and he was just like, I'll try that instead. And lo and behold, in October 1537, after a year and a half of queening around quietly, not disturbing Henry too much, in case he got some beheading tendencies left in him, Jane finally gave birth to a son, an heir, and Henry was over the moon. He had long desired this male son. The bells rang, the court rejoiced, the people rejoiced, but above all, Henry rejoiced in finally having that legitimate son, stout and red, just like his dad. He was heralded as the Tudor Messiah, but this royal blessing came soaked in blood. Jane had suffered a long and agonizing labor, 2 full days, before finally delivering young Edward. And even though she seemed fine for a while, even so well that she was up and walking, looking out the window, witnessing a part of Edward's christening just 3 days after his birth. Less than 2 weeks later, she was gone. She, just like Henry's mother, probably succumbed to postpartum complications. Most likely some kind of bacterial infection, common in childbirth during that era, since washing hands and stuff like that just seemed like a witchy fad. And Henry, well, he was devastated, at least to the capacity that he would be able to be that. He wore black, shut himself away, and did not remarry for over 2 years, a record for him. He called Jane his true wife, the only one that could give him what he wanted. And when he demised years and wives later, he actually asked to be buried next to her. It was kinda like through her silent nature, her obedience, sacrifice, piety, and overall just giving him that son he really wanted, that made her the ideal in his eyes, the perfect Tudor queen. Or maybe was it just that she did not live long enough to bore him or contradict him in any way? I'm kinda leaning to the last of those conclusions. Which one of those two do you think ring most true? Please let me know down below. I'm so curious to know. Either way, there was no scandal, no trial, no exile as with Catherine of Aragon, and just a quiet demise in a royal chamber, and a place of honor, of course, in Henry's crypt. A woman kinda remembered, dying in service of a man's legacy. And her greatest act was just to disappear the moment her purpose was filled. And years later, when he was married to his last wife and he was commissioning a family portrait, who was the only wife that he had on that portrait? Yeah, Jane Seymour. Forget the rest. Section 5. Anne of Cleves. From wife to beloved sister. So now to the year of 1539, and dear Henry is on the market again. Europe was a bubbling cauldron of alliances, betrayals, and, warring. That's what people did back in those days. With enemies to the north and the Pope's rage still boiling from, everything that's happened so far, Henry got persuaded into a political alliance. For once, this is the one and only time that he will do this. A strategic match. Enter Anne of Cleves, a German noblewoman whose Protestant ties promised a tasty diplomatic alliance. Henry, ever the romantic, wanted to see her first, and what better way than a portrait? He sent Hans Holbein to paint her likeness, and oh did Hans deliver! Elegant gown, high forehead, refined posture, she looked every inch the regal consort, despite that weird German fashion. Henry was smitten. He declared her beauty angelic, and he raced to meet her in person. But this was definitely not a fairy tale. This was a Tudor meet cute that went horribly wrong. When Henry, at this point a obese, he was a smelly man by this point because he had a wound on his leg from a jousting accident that did not heal, so it was like leaking things, and yeah, he wasn't the young and virile handsome man that he used to be. He came dressed up, not as the king, entering Anne's chambers to surprise her. And when she failed to respond with the proper swooning and simpering over this lovely, weird man, because she did not understand the protocol of royal roleplay, I guess, Henry was offended. Deeply, eternally, pettily. He later declared she looked nothing like her portrait, grumbling that she was no better than a Flanders mare. Yes, that infamous insult. But the truth, my morbid pals, and many historians agree. Anne was not ugly, not by any stretch. She was considered attractive by her contemporaries and described as tall, fair-skinned and elegant. It's far more likely that Henry's bruised ego and his utter lack of chemistry with Anne sparked that slander. Holbein's portrait, it did survive, and one look will tell you she was perfectly fine. Perhaps not as sultry as the dark-eyed beauty Anne Boleyn or the docile Jane Seymour, but certainly not the horse-faced abomination Henry made her out to be. And yet, political pressure saw to that the wedding went ahead. But it is said that the marriage was never consummated. Henry reportedly said he found her body displeasing and that she smelled bad. Well, that's coming from the right person. And meanwhile, I can only imagine that Anne breathed a very heavy sigh of relief not having to engage in that. After just 6 months, the marriage was annulled, and Henry claimed that she was just as much a maiden as he had found her, and had her sign off on the divorce. And she agreed. And what did she get in return for being so obedient and hastily jumping into this divorce? Well, she got a very generous settlement, several estates, a palace, the title of the king's beloved sister, and of course, sweetest of all, she got to keep her life. Anne of Cleves stayed in England and became friends with both Mary and Elizabeth, Henry's daughters, and outlived every single one of Henry's wives. She remained in good favor and managed to unsubscribe from her life by natural causes. In the year of 1557. Yeah. No tower there either, no scandals, and no swords, thankfully. Just a clever German woman who played the Tudor game without ever having to put her head on the block. Section 6. Katherine Howard, the teenage queen and her secrets. By the time very, very young, Katherine Howard graced the court as a lady-in-waiting for his previous wife, the German Anne of Cleves. Henry VIII was, as we said, a very rotund, rotting ruin of the golden prince he once was. His leg festering from that old wound, it oozed and reeked. He was moody, paranoid, and prone to tantrums. In short, a true delight. And of course, this aging monarch would find the extremely young teen-aged Catherine a bit of a prize. She was actually a cousin to Anne Boleyn, and that just makes her later demise even more ironic. And Henry, well, he was nearing his 50s and puffed up with dreams of reliving his golden youth. He called Katherine Howard his rose without a thorn, and how wrong he was. Catherine had been raised in the household of the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, sort of a Tudor high school without much adult supervision. And there, teenage Catherine, very hormonal, had already developed a taste for love letters and late-night rendezvous. One of these rendezvous included a rather saucy entanglement with a music tutor named Henry VIII. That affair did not last, but another did, with a young man called Francis Durham, with whom she may have had something resembling a pre-marital engagement. It was all very passionate and very incriminating. It was said that they even called each other wife and husband, but none of that had reached Henry's ears when he made her queen in 1540, right after Anne of Cleves was neatly shuffled off with a pension and a polite wave. And once crowned, Catherine did try to play the part. It must be said that there's not much to say that Catherine actually wanted to marry this very fine specimen of a bloated man. It was more her uncles and the other Howards in her family pushing her into it so that they could get some grace and money and land and, all of that stuff that people wanted. But for young Catherine, either way, they're married to this very old, stinking man. Court seemed quite lonely. Soon she began a very reckless affair with a handsome courtier named Thomas Culpeper. They exchanged secret notes and they met in dark corridors. It was all very romantic and fatally foolish. By 1541, rumors began to stir. Enemies whispered, investigations began, and soon the house of cards truly came crashing down. And with that, Catherine, this very young woman, cracked. Soon Durham, her past lover, was arrested, tortured, and he gave up every little detail, all the names, dates, and whatever. And then soon Culpeper followed. And under the racks, gentle persuasion, some little torture, he too confessed. Henry's heartbreak knew no bounds, and it quickly turned into full-on rage. As he wept, he roared, and he claimed Catherine had bewitched him. There would be absolutely no mercy, as always. Except with Anne of Cleves, of course. And on February 13, 1542, Catherine was led to the block on Tower Green. the same cursed square where her cousin Anne Boleyn had lost her head. She was barely 20 years old. They say she practiced laying her head on the block the night before, over and over, determined to go away into the afterlife with some dignity. And her final words, according to some contemporary sources, I don't know how contemporary they are, but legends say that her last words before getting shot was, "I die a queen, but I would rather died the wife of Culpeper." But however greatly Shakespearean and tragic that sounds, we do need to take it with a huge pinch of salt. And so ended the brief, bright, burning life of Katherine Howard, a teenage girl who wanted to live, to dance, to love, and instead became just another offering on the altar of Henry's ego. Section 7. Catherine Parr, the survivor queen. By the time Henry selected his final wife, Catherine Parr, in 1543, he was more of a bloated relic than any kind of regal tyrant. Wounded, paranoid, and just a few inches away from shuffling off into the great beyond, what Henry needed wasn't a sultry seductress or a flirty foil. Some say he needed a nurse. I think he wanted a companion just as much still, because this was a warm-blooded man, even though from the outside it would be hard to see by this point. And yeah, in comes his third Catherine, Catherine Parr. She was wise, warm, and very underestimated. For some reason, TV and film like to portray her as some matronly, older woman. She was actually just 31 years old when they married, 4 years younger than Anne Boleyn was when she got her head chopped off. And she was considered as very attractive. But beyond that, what's true is that she was twice widowed, no children, but well educated and deeply devout in the Protestant faith. She could speak multiple languages and wrote her own religious text and even debated theology. Frankly, she was even more qualified to rule any kingdom than her husband by this point, but did she flaunt it? No. Oh, no. Catherine was no fool. She knew very well of her husband's marital resume, and that read like a butcher's bill. Instead, she walked a very fine line, soothing the king's ache and ego by day, and writing reformist religious text by night. But this intelligence nearly became her undoing. In 1546, a warrant was drawn up for her arrest. The charge? Heresy. She had argued theology just a bit too confidently, and Henry, egged on by conservative courtiers, prepared to dispatch her in the usual fashion. But Catherine, being an absolute queen, threw herself at Henry's feet and said that she had only argued religion to distract him from his ailments and his aching leg. She also gave one reason for her debating him, that she was just trying to learn from him. A very clever blend of flattery and feigned submission. And just like that, he forgave her. There were not any more bumps in the road. She nursed him through his grotesque decline and was still his queen when he shuffled off this bloated mortal coil in 1547, leaving behind that only surviving queen. And so she remains in the history books as the woman who outwitted Henry, survived his reign and his homicidal tendencies, and published books under her own name, a feat almost unthinkable for a woman in Tudor England. So, yay! Congrats! Surviving Henry is a feat on its own, so yeah. And so ends our dance macabre of the 6 doomed, dazzling, vivacious, and defiant wives of Henry VIII, Henry Tudor, yeah. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. A rhyme for school children and fit for bloody history. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that very rambly little episode into Henry Tudor and his very sad love life. Either way, and most importantly of course the wives, let me know what you thought down below. Who is your favorite wife? Who is the most tragic of them? And yeah, just everything you got, throw it at me down there. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss whenever I post a video. It's really important, you know, to get the videos shared around and getting into that elusive algorithm that is very hard to tame. Either way, giant hecking thanks to my YouTube members and my Patreon members. I'm so serious when I say I could not do this without you. Like, if I didn't have that support, I would not be able to afford any of the software that I use to edit and record and yeah, find images and everything else that make the videos what they are. So thank you so much. It means everything to me. Also, I'm very sorry I haven't been able to update that regularly. I got the flu and it's the worst flu. This strain for some reason just keeps on giving. The doctor said that it can just keep on going for up to 6 weeks, and I'm on week 3, so there's that. Fun times. Either way, I really hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear your thoughts. And do all that, but most importantly, stay amazing, stay hydrated, and of course, stay morbid, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye!